In this video, I'm going to talk about the 13th chord. We'll look at some examples and then figure out effective ways to incorporate it into your playing and arranging. In a previous video, I went over several upper structure chords, ninths, 11ths, and 13ths, and showed you how to construct them on major, minor, and dominant chords. In this video, I'm going to focus on the 13th when applied to a dominant chord. For the dominant 13th chord, first build a major minor 7 chord, that is, a major triad, with a minor 7th interval on top of the root. Here's one built on C as the root. That would be the dominant, the 5 chord, in the key of F. That's C, E, G, B flat. Then add a ninth, which is the same as a second, and then an 11th, which is the same as a fourth. But we're going to raise this note 1/2 step, a raised 11th. Most musicians feel this pitch sounds better when you raise it like this because it's more aligned with the overtone series on C. Then finally, we'll add the 13th, which is the same as the 6th. Now let's build that same chord on the root of G. This will be a dominant 13th, the 5 chord in the key of C. So that's G, B, D, F, a major triad with a minor 7th, and then the 9th, A, the same as the 2nd. The raised 11th, C sharp, same as the raised 4th, and then the 13th, E, same as the 6th. Now, in practical usage, the 13th chord may not include all these notes. Certainly the 5th is often omitted, as it really doesn't add much color to the chord, and it's already present as a strong overtone of the fundamental root tone. You may also see the chord without a ninth, and maybe even without an 11th. Look at this example from the Chopin Ballade No. 2 in F major. Notice the 5 chord, alternating with the 1 chord. Here, C, E, the 5th G is omitted, B flat, the 7th, the 9th, and the 11th omitted, and then the 13th A. With all these omissions, you might want to question whether to call it a 13th chord at all. Certainly the pitch A is voiced higher than the B flat, which gives some impression of a 13th. Some theorists will call this a 13th chord, and others, including myself, prefer to call it a dominant 7th chord with an added 6th, a 5-7-6. The 6th being more of a coloristic tone, since the chord does not include the 9th or sharp 11, and its tertian structure all the way up to the 13th seems somewhat incomplete. It's still a great chord, very useful. The 4th intervals between those top 3 notes are very distinctive. Look at this example by George Gershwin, his 3 preludes from 1926. He takes the structure, just the same one we saw, the exact same voicing, and repeats it at successively higher, minor 3rd intervals. Here's an example by Debussy from his prelude L'après-midi d'un Fan. Built from the root tone E, we have the major minor 7 chord E, G sharp, B, D, the 9th F sharp, and the 13th C sharp. Everything here except the raised 11th. Most would agree that this is a great example of an E 13th chord. Here's another example by Debussy from his Preludes, Book 1. This one is called the Interrupted Serenade. The notes built up from the root tone E flat, G, B flat, D flat, and then the 9th, F, the raised 11th, A, natural, and the 13th, C. All the notes for this 13th chord are here. It's very complete. For clarity, I'd call this an E flat 13th chord with a raised 11th. The pop chord symbol would be E flat 13th, sharp 11. Look at the next phrase. Debussy makes an alteration. The F is altered to F flat. That's a lowered 9th. The pop chord symbol here would be E flat 13, flat 9, sharp 11. Now it would be best to return to our original diagram of the 13th chord and include some of the possible alterations of the upper structure notes. A flat 9 or even a sharp 9 is possible. A flat or A sharp in this chord. Also, you might encounter a flat 13th. That's an E flat in this chord. For reference, build a 1-octave chromatic scale starting on G that includes all the notes of the 13th chord, including the possible alterations. G, A flat, that's a flat 9, A, the 9th, A sharp, the sharp 9, or you could spell it B flat, B, the 3rd. There is no C, remember. C sharp or D flat, that's the sharp 11. D, the 5th. E flat, the flat 13. E, the 13. F, the lowered 7th. And of course, there is no F sharp in this chord. Remember, when we label notes of the chord like this, we're doing it generically, with reference to the major scale that's built on the root tone of the chord, the G scale in this case. For example, flat 9 means to lower the 9th or the 2nd note of the major scale by a half step, and it doesn't necessarily mean to add a flat. So flat 7 in this instance refers to F natural, since that's the lowered 7th from the G major scale. In this way, you can use the same formulas regardless of the root tone of the chord that you're building. Keep in mind that all of the notes of the G chromatic scale could be harmonized with some type of dominant 13th chord, except of course for the C, the perfect 4th above the root, and F sharp, the major 7th. This information will come in handy when we move on to the next step. Now, to incorporate dominant 13th chords into your arranging and playing, musicians find that good sounding voicings result when you add some triadic structure above the 3rd and 7th of the chord. In other words, for a G13 chord, always make sure that you are including the 3rd, the B, and the 7th, the F, as these are the most important structural tones of a dominant 7th chord, and it helps to define its quality. But then build major or minor triads that include one or more of those upper structure notes, the 9th, 11th, and or the 13th. Just make sure not to include one of those notes that does not meld with the dominant 13th chord, the perfect 4th, or the major 7th. Let's do this systematically. First, build a major and a minor triad on each chromatic step. Then, check each triad against the modified chromatic scale that we built that includes all of the possible notes for G13th. Now, the triads built on the first note of the chromatic scale are of limited use. They do fit the 13th chord, but they don't really offer much in the way of interesting pitches. Of the triads built on flat 2 or flat 9, we can't use the major triad because it has a C, which is the 4th. But we can use the minor triad. A flat is the flat 9, C flat and harmonically is the 3rd, and E flat is the 13th. Of those built on 2, or the 9th, we can eliminate the minor triad because that includes the C, the 4th. But the major triad is very useful. That's the 9th, the sharp 11th, and the 13th. Now those built on flat 3, same as sharp 9, have limited use, but they can work. The major triad is the sharp 9, the 5th, and the flat 7. And for the minor triad, the B flat is the enharmonic sharp 9th, the D flat is the enharmonic sharp 11th, and the F is the flat 7. Of course, some of these triads that we're looking at here don't include the 13th, but we'll include them anyway if they're interesting and provide us a chance to write an upper structure dominant chord. For those built on 3, we have to eliminate both because they both have the F sharp, the major 7th. Likewise, for those built on the 4th, we have to eliminate them because they both have the 4th, C. Now those built on sharp 4th, same as sharp 11th, are very useful. The major triad is the sharp 11th, the enharmonically spelled flat 7, E sharp here, and G sharp, which is the enharmonically spelled flat 9th. The minor triad is sharp 11th, the 13th, and the enharmonically spelled flat 9th. Of those built on 5, we have to eliminate the major triad right away. It has F sharp, which is the major 7th. We can use the minor triad, but it has limited usage. It's just the 5th, the flat 7th, and the 9th. Those built on flat 6th or flat 13, we have to eliminate the minor triad because it has a G flat. That's enharmonically the same as a 7th. The major triad is very useful. That's the flat 13th, the root tone, and also the sharp 9th spelled enharmonically. Those built on 6th or 13 are both very useful. The major triad is the 13th, the flat 9 spelled enharmonically, and the 3rd, and the minor triad is the 13th, the root, and the 3rd. Now we can't use either triad built on the flat 7th because they both contain a C, the 4th. Now, of course, if we were discussing a different chord quality, we could then use some of the triads that we are eliminating. For example, you could use the F major triad if we were talking about a G minor 11 chord or a G9 sus chord. You could even use the F minor chord if you were talking about a G7 sus flat 9 chord, but that's a topic for another video. And we can't use either triad built on the 7th because they both contain the major 7th, the F sharp. So let's go ahead and apply these voicings in some standard songs. If you have a fake book, you can follow along. To keep it simple, I'll only create voicings with a G dominant 13 chord, but we'll harmonize all the possible melodic notes with these upper structure triads that we chose. Keep in mind that we may use the triad and various inversions, and that the pitches may be spelled enharmonically for ease of reading. And we will always make sure that both the 3rd and the 7th pitches are added to complete the voicing. First, if the melody is the flat 9, you have 4 possibilities. Look at a few measures from the song Easy to Love. Here's the minor triad on flat 2 in the right hand. We add a 7th and the root tone below. The same excerpt, now with a major triad on sharp 4. With a minor triad on sharp 4. And finally, with a major triad on 6. If the melody is the 9th, as it is in this section of Don't Blame Me, use the major triad on 2. For the melody on the 3rd, here's another section of Don't Blame Me. Write a minor triad on flat 2. Look at these measures from Blue Bossa for melody notes on the sharp 9 or flat 3 enharmonically. There are 3 choices: a major triad on flat 3, a minor triad on flat 3, or a major triad on flat 6. Now, melody notes on the sharp 4 are a little rare, but there's an example at the beginning of Desafinado. Use a major triad on 2. Or a major triad on sharp 4. Or even a minor triad on sharp 4. Remember now, these are spelled enharmonically. And finally, a minor triad on flat 3. For melody on the 5th, look at My Funny Valentine. We'll use the major triad on flat 3. This creates a rather distinctive sharp 9 chord that might not always be desirable. For flat 13 in the melody, look at the last line of Easy to Love. We'll voice it with a major triad on the flat 6, which of course is the same as a flat 13. Also, try a minor triad on the flat 2. The song All of Me has a dominant chord with a prominent 13 in the melody. For this, there are 3 choices: the major triad on 2, the minor triad on sharp 4, and the major triad on 6. My Funny Valentine has an instance of a dominant chord with a 7th in the melody. That's actually a difficult melodic note to use with a 13th voicing, because 13ths like to be voiced above the 7th, so instead we'll build it up to the sharp 11th. Our best choice here is the major triad on the sharp 4. And finally, we can even consider a melody note that is the root tone of the dominant chord. I'll use an excerpt from Angel Eyes, where I can get a dominant 7, sharp 9, flat 13 chord if I use a major triad on the flat 6. Okay, we've covered quite a bit here. Here's a chart that summarizes the triads that you can use in your voicings with various melody notes on G dominant chords. Of course, you should try to apply this to chords of any given root tone. We'd better end this video so you can start practicing.